Okay, welcome back. We're going through 2019. We're looking at October and November 2019 question paper 11. So same thing like before, we're going to start from the bottom. Okay, please just be aware 29 is not included, okay? So what would reduce the volume of international trade in the world economy? What we're talking about here is we're talking about protectionism policies. Remember, they're designed, or they will reduce the level of international trade. So they're things like quotas, which are restrictions on the imports, tariffs, etc. Right? So if the Swedish government grants aid to Somalia, that's not going to reduce the volume of international trade, will it? In fact, it may allow, depending on how the Somalian government uses the money, it may allow them to increase the level of trade or exports that they're providing. So it may actually allow a higher volume of international trade. If the Canadian government introduces a quota on Malaysian electronic products, that will reduce the amount of international trade. They're going to limit the amount of imports they can bring in from Malaysia. Whereas for A and B, these are specific circumstances. German company makes a loan to a Nigerian company, and a Japanese car manufacturer establishes a factory in the Czech Republic. Again, both of those are likely in the long run to encourage international trade. Loans will help the Nigerian company to create more products, and Japanese car manufacturer establishing a factory in the Czech Republic, it may allow them to reduce their average costs, which mean they may be able to produce more and therefore trade more. 28. So these are again our protectionist policies, and they reduce the level of economic growth. What is a possible reason for this? Okay, so production possibility of an economy expands. That's not going to be the answer, because what that is going to do is that is going to, if the production possibility curve expands, that is going to increase the potential economic growth within an economy. Average cost of production decreases. Again, that is going to help to generate economic growth if we can make goods and services cheaper. Tariffs encourage trade, so that's incorrect. Tariffs do not encourage trade. Tariffs discourage trade, so tariffs will bring down the level of trade, so that statement is incorrect. Whereas incomes earned from trading decline, that is a possible reason. So as we use protectionist policies like our tariffs and like our quotas, what's going to happen is that we're restricting the level of trade, and that may reduce the level of economic growth, because people may start to earn less money than they were before from either selling or bringing in products. Question 27. So for this one, what would cause a favorable change in the Kenyan trade in services? Okay, the invisible account. So what we're looking for here is which one is going to be a service that's provided, right? If a Kenyan tea company increases its exports, that is going to affect the export of goods, so that is going to increase the balance of trade in goods, which is a component of the current account, but it is not a service. A Zambian company increasing its exports to Kenya, we're looking at the current account for Kenya here, they tell us, right? So that is going to decrease. Because we're going to import more, that's going to decrease the balance of trade in goods for Kenya. Remember, imports decrease it and exports increase it. So we're left with A and C. Now for C, for example, a Kenyan trade delegation go to promote coffee sales visiting India. Now that may result in a long-term increase in sales, but we're not getting paid for anything there. So it's not going to increase our current account immediately because we're not receiving a payment for it. Whereas if a Kenyan company wins a contract to transport exports from Uganda, that is going to be a service that the Kenyan company is providing, so it will be included in Kenya's trade in services. And winning a contract means they're getting paid for doing so, so therefore that will help to increase our trade in services account. Question 26. The table shows the percentage share of GDP by the richest 20 and poorest 20. Which country had the greatest extremes? Okay, so the country with the greatest extreme is going to be the country that has the highest percentage of GDP held by the richest 20%, and the country which has the lowest percentage of GDP held by the poorest 20%. And we can see that that's going to be South Africa. So in South Africa, 64.8% of all of the generation of the output incomes is held by the top 20%, whereas the bottom 20 is only holding about 3%, which means they have the greatest income inequality here. Okay, in Botswana, better healthcare has meant that birth rates have been falling faster than death rates. Also, the number of children born on average to each woman has declined from 6.4 to 3.2. What may be concluded from this information? Okay, so they're having less children, and the birth rates are going down quicker than the death rates, right? So we're looking for, why has the birth rates gone down? Well, what can we conclude? So government spending on education will need to increase. We can't conclude that from the text, can we? We've got no information on their education metrics. There will be in the long run an increase in population. That's wrong. Birth rates are falling faster than death rates. In the long run, there's going to be a decrease in the population. We've got less people being born and more people dying comparatively. There'll be a decline in income for each person working. Again, we can't conclude that. Okay, but we can conclude that medical improvements have resulted in falling infant mortality rates. Because even though we're told that the birth rates are going down faster than the death rates, that means that the death rates have to be going down too. So we're looking for something that we can conclude, which is either the reason for the dramatic decrease in birth rates or the reason for the fall in the death rates, which is what this one is here. Okay, what is a typical characteristic of a developing economy? So in general, in a developing economy, they are trying to be rich, but they're still poor. Okay? So would we have an equal distribution of income and wealth in a developing economy or in a poor country? No, we wouldn't. Would we have good medical care? No, we definitely wouldn't. In general. And would we have high GDP per head? No, we wouldn't. All of those things are more likely to happen in a developed economy. But we would have a high reliance on natural resources in a developing economy. Okay, we'd rely on those natural resources until we can develop, and then we might be able to find other methods or use resources in a more efficient manner, or possibly develop new ones. Question 23. Rates of inflation and deflation are measured. So remember, inflation is when it's positive, right? So it's going to be a positive number. Deflation is when it's negative, so it's going to be a negative number. That's because deflation is a reduction in the price of goods and services, and inflation is an increase in the price of services. So in which period did Japan experience deflation followed by inflation? First of all, deflation, we're looking for the negative, which is here in 2012. And then we can see in 2013 it was followed by a positive increase in the prices. So that would be C. Okay, which government policy would reduce economic growth? So what we're looking at here is our contractionary monetary and contractionary fiscal policies. Reducing economic growth, what does that equal? That's going to equal any policy that's going to move AD to the left, right? So if we cut the rate of corporation tax, that will move AD to the right, because it will increase the level of investment in an economy, which is one of our components of AD. And that, to be specific, is an expansionary fiscal policy. If we increase expenditure on education, what's that going to do? That's going to move AD to the right as well in the short term, because it's going to increase government expenditure. And then in the long term, or in the long run, that is going to move AS to the right. And we know that both of them will help to generate potential and actual economic growth. They will not reduce economic growth. Lowering the rate of income tax is the same as A. It will move AD to the right. It is an expansionary fiscal policy. Whereas if we raise interest rates, that will move AD to the left, and therefore it will decrease the level of investment in an economy, and it will decrease, or it will increase the level of savings by consumers, which means they're spending less. So consumer expenditure will also decrease. It is a contractionary monetary policy. Question 21. What are the components of the HDI? So many questions every year come up on this. Look over your other papers. I'm not going to go through them all at this stage. Very simply, life expectancy, expected years of schooling, and GDP per head are included. Now, this question comes up all the time, and it's always those three components. So just go and learn them. Okay, which period did Greece experience the longest period of positive economic growth? So if I can just highlight this here, I use the green. We see positive economic growth is only any area which is above here, because this is 0, right? So everything else down here is negative economic growth. So therefore we can see that in this period here we had the longest period of positive economic growth, and that would be 2014-2015. So we just have to recognize on the vertical axis here positive and negative, and then just read our graph essentially. Okay, diagram shows the impact of a government imposing an indirect tax on a good. The original demand curve, their original supply is here. Okay, total tax revenue. So just for you to be aware, the total tax revenue is essentially the full area of the indirect tax. Okay, now what we've gone through in class before and what we've seen is that the full area of the tax is calculated by taking the new equilibrium down to where we hit the original supply curve, right? So in this case, it includes this area in here, right? Now, there's a burden on the consumer and there's a burden on the producer included in here. If you think about it, the old price was $50, the new price is $60. So the burden for the consumer is the extra $10 that they're paying for the product now. But the full incidence of the tax is $20 per unit. That means that the producer has had to absorb this other $10 as their burden into their cost of production. Right? And because the full area of the tax is 20, the full tax revenue for the government is both of these areas together. Right? Which is 60 minus 40 here is 20, multiplied by the quantity or the new quantity that's being sold, which is 80, and that's going to give us $1,600. Okay, I've just showed you the producer burden and consumer burden there because that could be another question as well. Okay, question 18. Which actions are likely to increase government expenditure and to reduce revenues from taxation? Okay, so let's go through these. Improving health facilities for the elderly. Yes, that would increase government expenditure. Increasing the amount of the state pension. Yes, that would too. Providing free bus transport for retired people. Okay, let's stay with it and let's say yes. And raising the rate of retirement. No, that's not going to increase government expenditure. What will reduce tax fares? So if we increase VAT, that's not going to reduce the tax revenues, is it? It's going to increase our tax revenues because we're going to collect more value added tax. Same thing, if we encourage people to work beyond retirement, that's not going to reduce revenues, that's going to increase revenue because we're going to collect more in income taxes. Whereas if we encourage people to reduce their spending, we're going to collect less of these VAT or sales taxes that we've talked about before, which means our revenues will go down. The government will collect less in tax revenue. Okay, question 17, very simple. Expansionary monetary policy. Look over your previous videos. I've listed out the expansionary monetary policy tools numerous occasions. So a decrease in income tax rates, no. That would be an expansionary fiscal policy. Okay. Decrease in the budget deficit, same thing. That's going to be relating to our fiscal policy tools because our budget deficit is our government revenue and government expenditure, which is directly influenced by fiscal policy. A decrease in the money supply, no, it is a monetary policy, but that would be a contractionary monetary policy, which would be designed to move AD to the left. Whereas if we decrease the rate of interest, then we would have more borrowing, more spending, and less saving. So it would be an expansionary monetary policy designed to move our aggregate demand to the right. Okay, one aim of a government is to redistribute income through taxation in order to reduce inequality. Which policy will achieve this aim? So, if we impose a tax of $20 or 20 cents on every dollar earned, that is definitely not going to help to redistribute income through taxation, is it? Because that means that lower income earners are going to be paying the same tax. Remember, to redistribute income, we want to take money from the rich and give it to the poor, essentially. Okay? So if we increase the tax-free allowances, that means that lower income earners are going to pay less tax, and after which the tax must be paid progressively, which means that high earners pay more. Remember, progressive taxation is high income earners or high income, they will pay a higher percentage of tax, and low income will pay a smaller percentage. So that will help us to redistribute our income. Introducing a tax on all food, same thing. That's going to affect lower income earners more than higher income earners, because lower income earners are going to spend more on food and necessities. And provide an incentive by reducing taxes for the higher paid. So if we reduce taxes for the highest paid, same thing. That's not going to help to redistribute income. We want to get the higher income earners to pay more and the lower income earners to pay less. 15. A firm producing bicycle has the following costs. What happens to the average total cost over this range of output? Okay, so average total cost, remember, is our total fixed cost plus our total variable cost divided into our output. Okay, so that means in 10 it would be 1,100. At 20 it would be 1,800. And at 30 it would be 3,600. Okay, so let's calculate our ATC, our average total cost, which we've put up here. So for the first one, 1,100 divided by 10. So at 10 units of output, our average total cost is going to be 11. At 20 units of output, our average total cost will be 1,800 divided by 20, which is 9. And then at 30 units of output, our average total cost will be 3,600 divided by 30, which will be 12. So what can we see happens? It falls between 10 and 20, and then it goes up between 20 and 30. So it falls and then it rises. Okay, this one's very simple. In which month of 2017 was the usual pattern disturbed? So just take a look at the pattern here. We see the sales are going up every month from April to August. But in 2017 they go up between April and May, but they come down in June. And then they rise back up again in every other month. Right? So we can see very simply that June is the pattern, or the month where the usual pattern is disturbed, because sales go down instead of going up. Question 13. What is a characteristic of a monopoly market structure? So a monopoly, they are the only seller in the market. They can choose their price. They do not have many substitutes. They often have no substitutes at all. There are no external costs. That's not true. That depends on what they are making. They could still be making a demerit good and be a monopoly, and that would generate external costs. And there's easy entry into the market. That's incorrect. There are very high barriers to entry. Because they're the only firm, it's difficult to enter into the industry. Okay. What must result from an increase in output? So a decrease in the average cost, that's wrong. Average cost can go up or down. Okay, average cost goes up, diseconomies of scale. average cost goes down, economies of scale. Either can happen. A decrease in total costs, again, total costs can also go up or down when our output goes up. And that's kind of similar to our average cost or our economies and diseconomies of scale, right? Same theory applies. An increase in the fixed cost, that's not going to happen. As we increase our output, our fixed costs are going to go down, not up, because they're fixed in place, they won't change. So as we make more units of output, dividing our fixed cost, which stays the same, divided by our output, as our output gets bigger, the fixed cost or average fixed cost number is going to come down. But an increase in variable cost will happen. So variable costs will increase as we increase our output, because variable costs are linked to output. So they change with the level of output, whereas fixed costs don't. Okay, question 11. We've done this in class before. Which one is most likely? We're looking for after-tax net income, and we want that to be high because that's the amount of money she's getting into her pocket, right? And we want the cost of living to be low because we want it to be cheap for her to live in this country, right? So all we have to do is find higher and lower here, which we can see would be in D. Okay, this question was also done in class. For these three people, what is the most likely order of income from highest income to lowest income? Okay, so highest income will be the person that spends the least amount on necessities. That's going to be person Z. They only spend 20% on food, clothing and housing. Second is person X, who spends 35%. And the lowest income is person Y, who is spending half of their income on food, clothing and housing. So ZXY would be C. Question 9, unusual question. An African government has abandoned its own dollar and now uses the US dollar as its currency. Why would such a policy have been necessary? Okay, so it has nothing to do with commercial banks restricting their lending. Okay, they'd still use their own currency if that's the case. Consumers use credit cards rather than paper money. No, again, that's not something that would affect it. It's just a personal preference of consumers. It would have to be if its own currency lost any of the functions or characteristics of money. So if it stopped acting as a store of value, that might be due to something that we call hyperinflation. Okay, and a great example of hyperinflation is the country of Zimbabwe, where the same thing happened. Okay, in fact they could be talking about Zimbabwe here. That's where inflation becomes so high their currency value becomes useless. So again, it's nothing to do with the central bank controlling the issue of money too tightly. It's to do with the fact that their currency loses all of its value. Question 8. What is a non-wage factor? So a bonus is a wage factor because it's money that's paid. A commission is also money that's paid, so it is a wage factor. And so are overtime rates. Okay. Whereas fringe benefits, they're the benefits we get from a job. Like, let's say, for example, if I could take this across and give us an example, there's no transaction, there's no money paid. An example might be free meals on campus. Okay, no transaction of money, but it's a benefit we can receive that may change our mind about doing a particular job. Question 7. Table shows the quantity that producers are willing to supply at different price level. If price increases from 120 to 180, what will be the PES? Okay, so remember PES, our formula, is the percentage change in quantity supplied divided by the percentage change in price, right? So we just calculate these individually. The percentage change in quantity supplied, it goes from 20 to 80. So that is 60 is the change divided by the original, which is 20, and that gives us a 300% change in quantity supplied. Okay, whereas price, it goes from 120 to 180. So again, it's a 60 change divided by the original, which is 120. And that gives us a 50% change in price. Right? 300 divided by 50 is going to give us a PES value of 6. Okay, what would happen to the equilibrium price if the quantity supplied increased by 200 units at each price? So first of all, this is our equilibrium right now, where demand equals to supply. So our equilibrium is at a price of $7 per unit. Now if quantity supplied increases by 200 at each price, it would now be 1,000 at a price of 10. It would be 900 at a price of 9. It would be 800 at a price of 8. 700 at a price of 7. And 600 at a price of 6. So now we can see if the quantity supplied increased now at price of $6, we would be our new equilibrium, because our demand would equal to supply now with the change in quantity supplied. So therefore what happens? Our equilibrium price would move from 7 to 6, so it would decrease by $1. Question 5. What is most unlikely to be provided by a market system? So the most unlikely thing to be provided would be public goods, right? And that is due to the fact that public goods are non-excludable and non-rivalrous. So there is no profit incentive for private firms. Okay, so what we've got to do is identify the public good here. Now a museum is not non-excludable and non-rivalrous. Either is a school and either is a sports field, but street lights are. So street lights are a public good in this case. They are the ones that are most unlikely to be provided. A museum you can make money from a museum, you can make money from a school, and you can make money from a sports field, so they're not non-excludable. They are excludable, which makes them a private good, and they would be provided by private firms. Okay, what pair of economic institutions are found in a market economy? Remember, a market economy, there is no government intervention or involvement. Okay, it's left up to private firms and the price mechanism. Therefore, anything with the government doesn't apply. So nationalized industries are out, public corporations here are out, and all we're left with is monopolies and commercial banks. Okay, Sam wrote a list of how he preferred to spend his Saturday afternoon. Thunderstorm caused the cricket match and the town parade to be cancelled. What is the opportunity cost of going to the cinema? So this is the decision that he's making. Therefore, the opportunity cost is the next best alternative of that decision, which would be going to visit his relatives instead. So we got PPC in question 2. What can we conclude from the diagram? X can produce food and drink more cheaply than Y. No. PPC just shows us the total level of output. Okay. We have no indication or idea about the cost of them making these particular products. B. X experiences higher unemployment. No. Remember, unemployment is not just showing the line, it's having a point inside of the curve to show that you're inefficiently using your resources. So we're not shown that, therefore we don't know if X has higher unemployment. Y can produce food and drink more efficiently. Yes, that's true. We can see they're producing food and drink more efficiently because Y is able to produce more food and more drink than country X can. And Y has higher retail prices. That can't be determined from a PPC. A PPC only shows output. It does not show the prices. It just shows how much can be made, not how much they're sold for their cost. And finally, what is classified as one of the 4 economic resources? That would be enterprise. Remember, 4 factors of production is basically this question, which is land, labor, capital, and finally enterprise.